I like Julian Schonebel's image of a wave in his Basquiat film. That does make one think of the imaginative powers of a thinker in some ways. So I want these reflections both to be open to uh, poetic asides and some potentially obscure, not to say obscurantist, um, sidesteps. That being said, I also wanted to have some regulating principle which is readily graspable, which can grasp us and move us to think with it. And that I am trying to bring these reflections on Kant, on Nietzsche, to Zizek, while at the same time trying to keep them within the gravity of the Strauss Dostoevsky mirror or mise on a beam placement into infinity that we've already been working with. So, to that end, I'll bring in what seems to me a simple organ, as it were, or principle from which we can deduce what we're doing. And that's one statement from Strauss's introduction to the Spinoza book, where I can't at this moment quote it letter random, but it's something like the distinction between civilization on the one side and culture on the other side has proved to be totally fatal for the war years, for the years surrounding World War II, and for the fate of Deutschland, the fate of the for the fate of the Germans, let's say, the Deutsch folk. Um, I mean, remembering that the Jews were Germans, um, but that was in some way the point of contestation, whether the state could become truly a liberal state, which would allow everyone to be equal under the principle of the law, or whether it couldn't. Um, so the principle of civilization would mean really that the liberal solution should work, because true, it had been applied, say, by the Jesuits in China in a way that was open enough where they would allow the Chinese to still remain Chinese and become Catholic, allowing that there's so the presupposition behind that is that the Catholics have a form of universalism. That's what Catholic literally means, universal, where they attempt to roll everything into one body, to all the verses, the turns come into one, into the universe, um, or all the peoples should come under um, one God, let's say. But to say one God is sort of under one principle of the good. Um, yeah, so there's various ways where you could say there can be something like cultural differences, but still be civilization simpliciter, still be one universal truth. Um, the culture idea, on the other hand, is almost identical to nihilism, or so it would seem, because, and also we can understand this through the idea of romanticism, especially in the way I think that is the way that is developed by Isaiah Berlin, where Isaiah Berlin says what was you could find in all the romantics is this move towards the sui generis, that the most remote people, the Sumerians, or um, the archaic people of Crete with the linear A and linear B, or whoever you like in this Maria Gimbutas early European civilizations, or maybe some civilizations that go back before the official account says language was possible 70,000 years ago, I think is the date they give because of some anatomical reason. But that might prove to be overturned at some point, who knows. Language itself in its articulation might not be absolutely identical to the faculty that allows us to grasp what then is expressed and congeals around noises, as that what can be inferred to have to do with that noise, the whole, all the connotations that will come in. Somehow we have the faculty of bundling connotations together such that there always becomes a problem when anyone tries to speak of speaking literally, because every manner of speaking seems to be a dark corner in which connotation is holding its breath. But again, putting some of these uncertainties and zigzags aside, I want to state again that this question, I'm trying to make this simple question of the difference between civilization on the one side and culture on the other side, which Strauss says is fateful for those war years, into this Nietzsche parlance, so we can understand it in connection to what Nietzsche is saying, and then show how Nietzsche is criticizing Kant, and Kant would be kind of a step into Zizek, and therefore to bring all these considerations together and attempt to bring them towards a more ultimate consideration, which Nietzsche is especially drawing us towards, in which also into, of course, context with Heidegger. So in a way, we're taking it that these thinkers we're talking about are thinkers that have thought further into difficulties which are there, and which if we went to somebody else, they could give us some insight, but they wouldn't probably have gone as far or be as exemplary in them. And we'd probably be compelled to, even if we studied for many years, Bruno Latour or so, or whoever it may be, we'd be compelled eventually to go to the people that are a little bit better, and that would be some of the ones I've named, but especially, of course, Heidegger, Nietzsche, Leo Strauss, Dostoevsky, and probably lower down Zizek and Dugin. So Nietzsche is, let's say that in Platonic terms first. So let's try to make clear what the difference between civilization and culture would mean from the beginning of the tradition first. I'll try to make this, and okay, so, and also I want to add sort of nota bene, please write in and leave a comment and say this particular issue, you failed to give expression to it in a way that anyone can understand you. So challenge me to give a more candid expression that allows it to be readily gripped, or to grip the listener, to move them, so that they could potentially enter into the same vision, the same wave gathering up, be the same surfer on the same wave. So from the Platonic point of view, there's this great problem which I encountered, I think, fairly recently. I remember there was an episode of Jeopardy where I was told that somebody who was a great expert on, of course, trivia and memorized all these things, came also, I guess they were good with simple math, and they constantly, they won some ungodly number of shows in a row or whatnot. And then the thing was that people said, well, okay, so he's good at trivia, but then people begin to speak about all kinds of things, quantum physics, all, even if they're actually physicists, one begins more and more increasingly to have a sense this is just another list of trivia for gossip. This is a bunch of gossip, passing gossip. The theory of the month or whatever. So this is the problem that Socrates, who is actually in some way into gossip, wanted to distinguish gossip from gossip, which is the passing things, ephemeral, perishable, with the imperishable, with the true, with the things that would always be. So that you have Platonic ideas in their simple sense is just that this tree will die, this tree will undergo some peculiar fate. That's more on the side of the gossip. It's not that important, but we have forever before us this subject matter of tree. How do you get to that subject matter? Plato thinks that if we think of something like a line, a straight line, from within, not from any external force, the human being really knows what a straight line is, and we know in a way that gets us beyond what just a straight line is. So like that at a higher level, supposedly a tree, or supposedly the idea of the laws in general are supposed to come forth for human beings. But these things are supposed to be imperishable in the eternal realm, goes along with civilization. They should also be like a net, like the cosmos itself. So instead of the secondary causes, I think, as they are in Aquinas, meaning peculiar, actually things that you see, you also have to have this background idea of what are the forces in play that allow the peculiar things to do what they do, and that would be the theory of the cosmos. What is the cosmos doing? What's the cosmos about? Is the cosmos, what are its regulating principles? Once we have this theory of the cosmos, we can do deductions from it, just as when we had the theory of a Platonic soul, we could deduce its three parts: the concupiscent part, the irascible part, and the rational part. The problem of civilization and culture in some way seems to appear to us even in the earliest, even in the writings of Plato, even before the official doctrine of so-called natural right, which is the oxymoron, because the natural is supposed to be what comes forward by itself, and the right is, in Greek, law is nomos, or word, and that's what it's contrasted with, this nomos fusus debate, as it's so called. So a natural law would be somehow the word getting the better of the external object. But even before that was formulated properly, Plato in some way debated this, and the Greek Athenians in some way debated this when the comedians, for instance, when they had this idea of I think one of these plays is called the Assembly of the Women. So these ideas when you're asking what the place of, like the gender question today, what the place of certain people in the society really is, whether there should be equal voting power or whatever it may be, or on other issues. We'll have to go further into how this civilization culture break shows up in a number of guises, to be more clear about that. But ultimately, what it gets down to is there's one nest of spider webs which constitutes a regulating body of sort of a social contract, not merely a constitution which tells you what your state should be, but something which tells you how you're supposed to live. It also includes the moral element, not just the legalistic part. That there should be one way of life, basically one way of life. Although in certain respects there could be differences in habits and so on. I think Hegel brings this idea to the head, and that's partially why Zizek is always sort of mocking folk dances and stuff like that, because that's part that gets regarded as inessential and um, gets thrown out of the universal development picture of this universal civilization. Once you go to this idea of many civilizations, it becomes murky because the Platonic way of thinking, then there's many cosmoses, which doesn't really make sense. There can't be one truth anymore. There can't be any truth anymore. Um, so let's keep that in mind, and then let's go back to the Nietzsche thing. So Nietzsche's um, saying, first of all, he's going to very basic questions, which are very close to the ultimate questions. So, for instance, when he brings up Moliere on this virtue normativa issue, what he's really saying is you can't. He's challenging cause. So his teacher Schopenhauer, I mean, the not personal teacher, but philosophy that he learned a great deal from, had